Hi guys, today we're taking on the Lover's card, and the Lover's card is a little bit intense, and for some of you it might be mind-blowing because the original meaning behind the Lover's card isn't what we think it is. So nowadays we're associating the Lover's card oftentimes in our readings with love, relationships, that twin flame, and some readers will still equate it to a decision, right? A moral decision between the high road and the low road kind of thing, between your rationality, your intellect, and your instinctual nature. Originally, the older cards, there was depicted an image on the card, and I'll pull one from the what's it called, the Light of the Holy Tarot, or the Holy Tarot of Light, or what the hell, the Tarot of the Holy Light. Sorry guys, the Tarot of the Holy Light has a relatively comparable to the old version. So the old version would show a man at a crossroads, and left and right of him was a woman, behind them was an angel, and two trees, usually, right? So what did that symbology mean? That symbology meant for those days exactly what I was talking about before, this decision between the rationale and the intellect and the instinctual nature, right? So it's kind of like every time a man decides for one woman or for one depiction, the other becomes the mistress and runs next to him. So it's like if he decides for his rationale and his intellect, he can't dedicate himself completely to his emotions or his feelings kind of thing, right? If he decides for his emotions and his feelings, it's like always this imbalance. So it's a very difficult decision to make, and it also turns into a moral decision. That's the way you could see it too, between the high road and higher spirituality, or a road according to materialistic principles and material life. Neither one is wrong. Both ways are under the angel, right? Both ways are under the angel. And one woman looks towards the angel, and one woman looks towards the future in the distance, and the man is looking to the women, right? So this is also showing the intellect, right? The intellect and your rational understanding, if you take the symbols apart, which would be the male aspect, looking to the subconscious or the female aspect for guidance, which is what we do, right? Most of our intuitions and our decision making come from the subconscious, right? And that subconscious, though, has to be either directed to God or it's directed to the world, right? So that's where the real decision lies, if you're materialistic or according to those, pathways. And this is said without judgment. If you're walking according to the ways of the world, or if you decide to walk according to a spiritual path, it lies in that feminine part of your being, in your subconscious, right? So your subconscious is also very, very conscious. Make no mistake, it's very powerful. It creates everything you experience. So usually, and I talked about this in one of my other videos on how I see Christianity, so dig through it. But the symbol of, to me, Mother Mary and the Jesus child, it really shows how it's a nutshell of human consciousness, right? So if we see Mother Mary as the subconscious, right? And how was Mother Mary depicted? Always praying, always being directed towards God, listening to God, whatever God told her she would do right away. So God is the one that gives that impulse or that seed, and the subconscious receives it, this inspiration. And then if there are no other gods, no other husbands, no other anything behind it, right, or beliefs or doubts or fears which step in the way, this inspiration can be nourished, and it will be expressing itself as action, which is always represented as masculine energy, which is then the sun, right? So by way of us aligning ourselves to the divine, right, in our subconscious, when we receive those impulses from spirit, it will always come out in Christian or good action, right, or handlings, right? And that consciousness, or ego consciousness, or day-to-day consciousness, it's always looking to the mother or the subconscious, always listening inward for guidance, because that mother is connected to the divine, right? This is how Mary leads people to God, is by leading you to God. Your subconscious leads you to God when you allow it, or to fulfill its function of being aligned to that divine source to bring through inspiration, knowledge, and insight for you to act out into the world, right? So we see that kind of depicted as well in the Lover's card, but it goes even deeper than that, right? The Lover's card is also a card of sexual, I don't want to say magic, right? That's not what it is. But if you look up I didn't want to jump this far, but since it's coming out, I'm just going to go with it. So I'll start off with the Wizard of Oz Tarot. And here at the bottom, you see the Hebrew letter sword. Now, for those of you that have nothing to do with the Kabbalah, have never heard of it, look it up, please. Look up the word Zayin, Z-A-Y-I-N. Sword, Kabbalah, Hebrew, Gnostic. You can put in Gnostic as well, and see what pops up, because each letter of the Hebrew alphabet is a symbol for a wealth of spiritual knowledge. And this very letter, when these scholars see that letter, it immediately brings to mind the teachings around harnessing your sexual energy, right? And this is such a long story, and it's so complicated to explain but easy to understand that I can't do it in this video. Please look it up. But I will post a link below that is really easy to read through. But it explains how your Kundalini energy needs to be harnessed and not used in base sexuality, which is what these two women also could represent, is a lower sexuality, which is just, you know, getting your rocks off, or a higher sexuality, which moves into Tantra, and which is controlling that energetic force that is unleashed in you. And this leads to higher consciousness as well. So there are a lot of places in the Bible or in the Kabbalah which have been misrepresented. I'll read one of them to you. So for example, my son, hearken upon my wisdom. The book of Proverbs chapter 5 states, my son, hearken to my wisdom, bow thine ear to my understanding, thou that mayest regard discretion, and that thy lips may keep knowledge. For the lips of a strange woman drop as a honeycomb, and her mouth is smoother than oil, but her end is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death, her steps take hold on hell. When you read the former proverb, you might think that God is talking to somebody who is his son and warning him against a woman. And somebody might say that a woman is a whore, which is exactly what happened, whom you have to be careful of. And this is what common and ordinary people might understand when they do not know Kabbalah, it says here. But when making the right translation of that proverb based upon what we already explained to you, this is how the proverb should be translated. My son, Tifereth, hearken to my wisdom, Shakma. So that means listening to, then they explain it. So that means, my son, incline to balance your understanding, right? Which means to balance your understanding is to balance the energies that are within you, right? And to restrain from sexual misconduct, not because sex is bad, right? So we got to understand this. This is not about the physical act. It's not bad. It's the energies that we go into it with, and the energies that we transmute, because this is a very, very powerful energy, right? We don't understand how our sexual energy is incredibly powerful, and we can use it or work with it to transmute energy as well, to create a higher consciousness, right? To elevate ourselves. We've lost that knowledge of how to do that. And so what they're talking about here is it's not the actual woman, right? Or the physical woman. It's something else completely. But guys, look it up. There's a lot to it, and I won't get into it here, otherwise I'll get off track with this Lover's card. But it has a lot to do with that, and it's not exactly what we associate it with, you know, partners, twin flames, twin souls. This whole twin flame concept, you guys need to research that as well. Please do, because it's not that old, and all of a sudden it became dogma, right? So people didn't believe in this like this entire time. We come from, our culture is very romanticized, right? So we have these romantic beliefs and notions that sprang up probably around the Middle Ages and then moved forward from there, right? And then in the 1800s, with certain kinds of poetry, these romantic notions were further conceptualized, right? Further cemented. But it wasn't until about the 60s, I think Elizabeth Clare Prophet, some of you guys can Google her, who really started channeling and speaking about twin flames, twin souls. Then somebody dug up something that Plato had said, but all of a sudden it became doctrine. And it's very, for some people, I guess they need that right now, which is fine, you know. Everything, whatever you believe in, right? Whatever brings you through. But for those of you that are interested in really, not that I'm saying that nobody really is interested, but I hope you guys really understand what I'm saying, but that are really interested in understanding the ancient teachings and the ancient writings and what they spoke about the soul and what they said about the soul, it's going to bring a very different perspective to you. So just be prepared for that. Let's put it that way. Okay. So the Lover's card has a lot to do. Let's start off with the Rider-Waite version as well. So the Rider-Waite version, let's quickly go through some of the symbols in the Rider-Waite version. And let me just shift the focus here. 1 second, guys, while I switch the focus. Hello. So it doesn't focus on me all the time. Come on. There we go. Okay, so you see that? Alrighty. So we see here Adam and Eve standing in front of the trees of knowledge, the tree of knowledge. The serpent and the apple in one tree symbolize the Garden of Eden, forbidden knowledge and sexuality. The 5 apples represent the 5 senses behind Eve. The snake also represents the senses as well as the temptations of the world. Adam stands in front of the tree of life, a symbol of divine love. There are 12 flames representing the 12 signs of the zodiac, symbolizing the circle of life. The 2 trees symbolize pillars, the mountain forming the 3rd pillar, so on and so forth. The angel behind them is the angel Raphael, which is the angel for the planet Mercury, communication and air, which then associates this card to Gemini and the twin souls, so on and so forth, right? Raphael is the angel for communication, etc., etc., etc. So what we also see here is again this depiction of the male or action, right? Manifested action, manifested works, manifested consciousness, so to speak, the consciousness of man, looking to spirit or the female, right? The unconscious, that which emanates and manifests. Remember, both the high priestess and the empress that we talked about in the previous cards, they had not yet manifested. They brought through the energies which were needed for manifestation, right? They birthed the energies which were needed and the things which were needed for the emperor then to work with to manifest, create order and structure, and create the foundations of this realm, so to speak, right? So manifest looks to unmanifest, which looks to higher, right, for guidance. And so this is the flow of the information. This is the way it should go, right? This is what the ancients taught. And there is a saying in Judaism that women don't have to go to the temple because they're already in connection with God. This is why they're mothers, but men have to learn how to be. Now, this is not to turn into a man-bashing thing or whatever. This is not what this is about. We're talking about energies, consciousness, different ways of expressing life force energy, and the different functions that these different layers of consciousness carry, right? So this is where the strength of the masculine or the action-oriented consciousness lies, is in creating, right? But it needs to receive that information and those ideas and that creativity from the subconscious, right? So this information flows through the subconscious into the conscious, where it's then worked with. But man should be looking, the female or the subconscious needs to be directed to God. This is where the story of the fall comes in, where the subconscious starts to listen to something other than God, and both fall. So you can train your subconscious to, of course, right, listen to higher realms, right? So it doesn't have to listen to the whisperings of the world, which is represented by the snake, bringing in fear and doubt and disharmony and so on and so forth. Okay. So as we can also see is there's a little bit of water here on which she is standing, right? So emotions, feeling, but he's standing on dry land, right? So again, this representation of the feminine being that watery emotional force, and the masculine being this firm earthy kind of force. So this card is associated with the sign of Gemini, the twins, right? The twins have in many cultures a very deep and long history. Like I know in Navajo culture and in Native American culture, there are stories within stories about twins that save the world from the gods, or save the world from evil gods. But also in African stories, the twins are very important. And we see that here in the New Orleans Voodoo Tarot, the Marasa, the twins. And the twins here represent duality. And one of the many stories around the twins and the creation myths is about a farmer in West Africa, who would hunt monkeys, because the monkeys were always stealing his crops, ruining his crops, and so on and so forth. So the monkeys were upset, and they did whatever they did, but all of a sudden they managed to insert themselves into the pregnant farmer's wife. And every time, well, the farmer's wife would have the twins, right? Because before this farmer, only monkeys would have twins and humans wouldn't. So the farmer's wife started having twins, and as long as the farmer continued killing the monkeys, the twins would always die. So the farmer went to a priest and asked, what do I need to do? And it was like, well, stop killing the monkeys. So he stopped killing the monkeys, and the twins survived. So that became, one second, that became, hold on. The twins had great powers and caused the farm to prosper, and because of their origin, the twins are also often called Idun, meaning monkey. So in a lot of societies, twins are seen as either very benevolent or as very malevolent, depending, but they're usually seen as something unusual and somehow connected to divinity, right? So that we have those twins as well in our popular culture, where we talk about Raggedy Ann, Andy Cap, Hansel and Gretel, all these stories where the twins come through. So yeah, one second. So what are we talking about in the Lover's card? We're talking about after consciousness, because so far consciousness itself, right, or the essence of life itself has moved through various forms of consciousness. It's burst into expression with the Fool. It's recognized itself and its awareness of itself and its ability to be, right, in the Magician. Then it's recognized its core essence in the High Priestess. Then it starts to birth the energies it needs in the Empress to create the world it sees in the Emperor. It receives teachings and information from the Akash, from memory, from traditions, from what have you. And then it moves into having all this information and this knowledge, into exercising decision and learning how to discern in the Lover's card. Discern and make wise decisions that elevate itself or let itself fall. So this is part of why this is also depicted in the Lover's card, because that decision in the Garden of Eden elevated consciousness or let it fall, depending on how you see it. Well, it let it fall, right? So this is what this card is really about, what elevates your consciousness. So in the light of that, it's really important who you attach your life to, Who do you go with in life? Because whoever you surround yourself with, or whoever you're in a relationship with, their consciousness will affect yours and the development of your consciousness. So you can stall somebody's growth, right? And you can decide to stop your own growth by aligning yourself to somebody who's going down a different pathway, who's deciding for something else or other. It can bring you off track. So this is why it's very important to make a wise decision about who you hitch yourself to, right? Because that's the path you're going to end up going down, right? So, but the essence of the card has to do with, if you dig into it, and I will post the link below, really has to do with Kabbalah, Kabbalistic teachings, and has to do with honoring the sexual energies that you have within you and working with them in a balanced way in order to elevate your consciousness, open your pineal gland, and whoosh, grow. Okay? So let's move into the Crowley version of this card. 1 second. Sorry, I'm leaving it a little blurry, but I can't be bothered going back and forth. Also, this card has the number of the 6, so the 6 is assigned to harmony, right? So balancing out differences and balancing out everything, right? So these people that have 6 energy or lots of 6 energy, they're usually, or they're said to be, right? They like to have families, homes, harmonious relationships, are very creative and always seek the aesthetics in things and so on and so forth. So 1 second here. Let's move on to the Crowley version. The Crowley version has a little bit more symbols that are around our concept of love, like more to do with our modern day concept of love. So we see here, this is the Crowley. And so this stands for, and a book that I would recommend is The Art of Loving by Erich Fromm. And I'll put the link below as well. So The Art of Loving will explain more about love in our modern society, right? Or what we understand. And also help understanding of this card on that level of taking information, right? So anyways, so we see here 2 children. We see a young man and an older man, a young woman and an older woman, depending on how you want to see that. You see a lion, you see a snake and an egg, you see the sign, the eagle, and you see a mole. So what does this all mean? So 1, remember that this is a 6 card. So since it's a 6 archetype, it ties also in with the 6s in the minor arcana. So the 6s in the minor arcana are everything that you will need to have or enjoy fruitful relationships with others, right? So the 6 of coins, the 6 of coins is, for example, fair give and take, fair exchange, right? But it's also symbolizing generosity. It's also symbolizing giving when the other has nothing, but it's also symbolizing receiving when you need to receive. Being able to receive, having the ability to receive is really important in order to have a fruitful relationship. You can't have a relationship with 2 givers, right? So at one time somebody's got to give, and at one time somebody's got to receive, and then it's got to flip, right? Because it's got to be in fair balance. But there has to be a receiver, so you have to be able to accept love, accept gifts, accept compliments. So you have to be stable in your sense of self and worthiness, right? Worthiness. That's what this card really also deeply represents, is worthiness. So then the 6 of Wands, which represents loyalty, which represents standing fast, perseverance, holding true, which represents a success as well, right? Success and standing proud, you know, and allowing support, being supportive, but also letting the past be the past. Because when you win, or when you look at this card of the 6 of Wands, at least in the Rider-Waite, where he's sitting on his horse and he's riding in victorious, he's not thinking about everything that went wrong in the past. He's staying in that moment, right? And his supporters around him. So there's a certain loyalty there that is being depicted between the people that supported him and him, the winner, but also the winner to the people, and so on and so forth. And there's the Six of Cups, which represents memories and enjoyment, right? So this sense of friendship and the sense of freedom and expression, feeling free with one another to express yourself exactly the way that you are, reveling in a beautiful memories and beautiful enjoyable moments that will turn into enjoyable memories. So this feeling of comfort and this feeling of freedom with each other, right? Like children do. Six of Cups. Then there's the Six of Swords, which indicates allowing freedom to blow in between the two of you, right? So there has to be freedom in spirit, freedom in thinking. You have to also be able to transform your thinking within the relationship. You have to be willing to leave one shore of understanding to be brought to another shore of understanding, right? You have to be willing to grow. If you're not willing to grow in consciousness, if you're not willing to enjoy yourself and just let things be, and if you're not willing to have a fair exchange, and if you're not willing to receive, it's most likely going to be very difficult for you to have fruitful relationships with others. So that's what this card is hinting at by connecting it with the sixes in the minor arcana. So it's also connected to the Devil card, right? Which is the flip side, actually, of the Lovers. So the Lovers is freedom, right? The freedom of choice. And the Devil is the addiction, or the tie-in, or the manipulation, or the chained, being chained to your vices kind of thing, right? So that's something else entire. That's like the opposite end of this experience. So let's get to the symbols on this card. So the symbols on top of this card is, we'll start with Amor on the top of the card. Reminds us that there are two main ways of love and two main poles, right? Ends of love. So one would be compassion, which is what we consider the highest form of love, compassion, and the other, which is not which is not feeling sorry for someone, right? So this is not pity, and this is not, letting yourself be dragged down into someone else's misery. This is understanding and still being in a loving perspective towards someone else and their suffering, right? So compassion, and the other end would be passion, right? So passion and compassion. So these are two opposite ends of the card of the Lovers, or the twins, right? So then there is Eros. Also reminds us that there are 5 ways to have love relationships, right? 5 types of love relationships. So the first one would be the love of the servant to the master, and that shows itself in job situations. It shows itself, but I think that shows itself pretty much everywhere. So some people, even in love relationships or marriages, would say that one person is definitely the master in the relationship and the other is the servant, kind of, right? So the second one is the love between friends. The third would be the love between between parents and children. The fourth would be love between husband and wife. And the fifth is the passionate and this illegal kind of love, unallowed kind of love, right? The symbol of the Lovers shows us the different types of relationships and bindings that we can enter into, that we can experience in this life, but also the responsibility that is attached to each of these relationships that we have. And this card also shows the yin-yang, or the duality, or the principle of duality, which was also shown by the Lovers here, right? The principle of duality. So light and dark, tall and short, known and unknown, positive, negative, whatever. It's all part of life, right? Then let's see. the animals in the, oh my gosh, 1 second. In Zeiten der Dunkelheit, dargestellt durch das dunkle Kind, ist es wichtig, dass wir uns von unserer Intuition. So in times of darkness, which is shown by this dark child, it's important that we honor our intuition, right? That we honor our intuition, that we trust our intuition, and that we have in our belief and our thinking the right alignment, the right way of thinking, right? And in positive times, it's important that we follow whatever our heart is saying. So this is the cup that is held by this child. So we should strengthen ourselves during the positive times, so that we have enough faith and belief in the negative times to maintain the balance, to keep walking our walk, right? So the animals in the bottom of the deck remind us of the 3 principles that all relationships are going to ask from us. So 1 is creativity with a lion, 2 is loyalty and setting clear priorities with a Scorpio eagle, and 3 is that we transform ourselves. Like, relationships are meant to transmute us. This is tie into the original meaning. Remember, with our Kundalini energy, which is meant to transmute us to higher. So relationships and the relationships we enter into, they're meant to transform us. And that's part of the problem with a lot of relationships nowadays, is that people don't want to allow themselves to be transformed. They don't trust the transformation because they don't see where it's going. They forget that life is in control of who we ultimately become, and that we are an expression of a higher consciousness, that we're not in control of that, right? We honestly believe we create ourselves, and we use our egos as bulwarks or as walls against the transformative energies of relationships, right? Which is a tool in the hands of higher consciousness to bring out that of us which we need to bring out. So just like a snake sheds its skin, we're meant to shed ourselves through relationships and move forward transformed, right? So as the egg, we're always making new beginnings, always making new beginnings. And it's also reminding us that only truth can be the basis of a successful relationship. Like, we have to have truth in relationships for it to be successful. So those were the main symbols as far as I can tell. 1 second. Yeah. So yeah. Yes, those were the main symbols. So basically it's talking, the other ones are representative of 2 aspects looking at each other, right? And they're going to be transformed through their relationship with each other. Both of them are relying on their intuition. They're bringing in creativity, loyalty, and they're going to experience one of the many different forms of relationships that Eros has in store for them, right? In order to transmute and alchemize. Yes. So, but it's also representative of the male-female streams of energy within you that go up and down your spine, but more in the links below. Okay? Then one last thing before this becomes too long and I lose you guys forever is the rune Gabo. So you can barely see it, but this little X here, that's a rune. And this rune is called Gabo, and it's the root word for Geben or Geschenk in German, but Gabo is a rune that is used a lot for love. It's used in love magic. It's also used in binding magic. Let me shift the camera back now. 1 second. And it can be used for, depending on your intention, it can be used in binding and so on and so forth, but whatever. But it's used for love, and it's also it's a rune of give and take. So this is why, remember we were talking about the ability to receive, so this is why this is assigned to the Lovers card because it's an exchange of gifts. It represents giving and taking, giving and receiving. So this is the balance, and this is actually yourself giving to yourself, right? That's what Gable represents. So recognizing the spark of the divine in the other, and realizing that when you give, you're giving to yourself, and when you receive, you're receiving from yourself. That makes it easy. No pride needed here. And Gable can be used for bindings, for blessings, or even for curses. And I won't dive into that. It's often used at weddings as well. So but they were pretty, back in the old days, in the Nordic days, they were pretty, how should I put this? Their culture back then seemed to be very, very clear about the rules of giving, right? Amongst friends and so on and so forth. So we have to understand this. Like in some cultures, it's such minute little things, you know, that differ from culture to culture. Like in some cultures, it's like if you give a friend $5, and literally, I'm talking literally $5. This is not like $50. So in some cultures, you give a friend $5 and you guys don't care, you know, it's like whatever, right? $5, who cares? Like next time I'll get it from somebody else, or somebody will give me something, or I'll buy, somebody else is going to buy me a drink, whatever, right? Nobody's going to care, like literally nobody thinks about it. But in other cultures, it's not like that. You know, those $5, people remember and they want their $5 back. Otherwise, you're not a good friend. You're taking them for granted. So to understand modern cultures, sometimes we have to dig a little bit into the past. And this is one of those where you can see these old Nordic runes from who knows when, where it's saying that if you're a man, and I'm quoting freely, like this is not an official translation, right? But a man should be lifelong friends with his friends, and should answer presents with presents. When they laugh, you should laugh too, and when they lie, then you should lie too, right? So whatever you get, you give, basically. And no human is so selfless that he would return a present that was made specifically for him. And no man is so rich that it would hurt him if you gave back to him what he has given out himself. In other words, pay back what you received. So we can see how this like flows through cultures, right? Through the subconscious, right? Or the cultural subconscious. Remember, when we come together in groups of people, we form consciousness, right? So it's not just our individual consciousness here. So it flows through the cultural subconscious as well. So check it out. It's really interesting to dive into old histories and how things came to be and so on and so forth. Anyhow, Gabo is a rune that has to do with giving, that has to do with the exchange, giving and receiving, and honoring that as an important part in relationships. Okay, so there we have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope I didn't ramble too much, and I'm wishing you a wonderful evening. And don't forget to check the box below for all the information, and I will see you tomorrow with the Chariot. Take care.